Greetings and warm welcome to another edition of the debate coming your way from our headquarters in Tehran. I'm your host, Behruz Najafi. Hello, Jack. Twitter has shuttered accounts of real Iranians, and including TV presenters and students, for supposedly being part of an influence operation. Well, this is part of a tweet by Foreign Minister Zarif in objection to the Twitter move. The top Iran diplomat has also wondered how come robots in Albania's capital Tirana that are used to seek regime change in Iran can keep spewing anti-Tehran propaganda out of D.C. We're going to tell you who Mr. Zarif is referring to and those who support them to stretch the facts regarding Iran in their what the Iranian leader has called media war against Tehran. Okay, now let's see who is joining us in this debate show. We'll have publisher and editor with Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos from London, and also founder of American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mike Lane, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of the debate. Now, let me start with Marcus Papadopoulos in London. Twitter has not accepted to interview neither the Reuters nor the Al Jazeera TV channel. What does that mean, in your opinion, and why are they refusing to respond to questions about their behavior?
Well, whilst Twitter's decision is disconcerting, it is not surprising, because after all, Twitter is a billion-dollar American social media company, and a billion-dollar social media company registered in America is not going to be independent of the American establishment, especially in the context of foreign affairs. Social media companies like Twitter and also like Facebook will be harnessed by the American government to pursue its geostrategic objectives around the world. And of course, ever since Mr. Trump entered the White House, Iran is firmly on his radar. And indeed, Mr. Trump and also the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, have made it very clear they want to see the overthrow of the Iranian government, the destruction of the Islamic Revolution. We should also bear in mind that in recent times, there has been very significant Saudi investment in Twitter. Now, if you put that all together, that Twitter will be harnessed by the American government when it comes to achieving its geostrategic objectives around the world, combined with Saudi investment in Twitter, you start to understand why Twitter has taken this decision. Because after all, if you just temporarily park Israel to the side, Iran's most potent enemies in the world are, of course, America and Saudi Arabia.
All right, now let's go to Washington, D.C. Mike Lane, who do you think is behind Twitter's move, and what is their agenda, and how can this duplicity be explained?
All right, first of all, I'd like to say that although I can hear the studio and you very clearly, the audio feed from my colleague in London is coming in quite garbled, so I'm not really familiar with what he had to say. But
so
to
we'll
answer your question,
problem if my colleagues yeah.
And I think I understood it. Thank you.
Sure.
To answer your question, which is the assignment of blame, I think, on the Twitter. The which agenda?
Twitter's agenda.
Twitter's agenda, right. You know, Twitter is a very difficult company to figure out. It's a company that is over a decade old. It's big, but I don't know many people would call it successful. It's never really achieved its potential. It is under tremendous pressure, both from its investors, to figure out some way to start making money finally, and it's under tremendous pressure from various governments to either be more restrictive or less restrictive in terms of the posts that it allows to go. These influence its economic viability and its reputation in the global marketplace as a free and open forum or platform for expressing views. It is under attack in many countries, particularly here in the United States, where there were hearings in front of the United States Congress last week or the week before, I believe, where it was very credibly accused of censoring posts from conservative news organizations and other conservative points of view. So Twitter is under a great deal of attack. I suspect that what they're doing in the Middle East is an attempt to mollify domestic critics here in the United States, but it's not getting them very far because they're just a company that is doing almost everything wrong and everything right at the same time. But they can't seem to find that sweet get it right. And so who really knows what Jack Dorsey, the CEO, is doing, other than I would note that he did say in the hearings last week that as far as domestic criticism is concerned with Twitter, he admitted that employees of Twitter with a conservative political point of view do not feel safe at their jobs expressing their points of view at Twitter. It's an amazing company that's just in trouble.
Okay, let's go to Marcus Papadopoulos in London. Marcus, as you know, a large number of journalists in the United States and elsewhere in the world refer to Twitter to get their information on which they base their reporting and programming. Now, how can one trust Twitter when it closes Iranians' accounts and allows anti-Iran propaganda bots keep falsifying and making up stories?
Well, as the Iranian foreign minister said, there is a media war going on at the moment in the world against Iran. And Twitter is a formidable weapon for the American establishment to use against Iran. But nonetheless, there are millions of users in the world who are challenging the American establishment's narrative when it comes to Iran. And of course, for the Americans, for Washington, that is a very serious problem. The Iranian foreign minister referred to it as a media war. I would refer to it as a communications war. The Americans are very conscious that the days of the 1990s, which were a golden era for the Americans, are long over. In the 1990s, there was no alternative to American mainstream media. There was no press TV, there was no social media. Now, today in 2018, there is press TV, there is also Twitter, there is also Facebook. Now, on the one hand, Twitter can be very, very useful for the American establishment to use against countries such as Iran, such as Syria, such as America. But on the other hand, there's a problem for Washington, and the problem is those people who are using Twitter, Iranians and non-Iranians alike, who do not agree with the American policy towards Iran, who believe that America has no right to threaten the independence and sovereignty of Iran, that America has no right to call for the Iranian government to be overthrown, for the Islamic Revolution to be destroyed. So the Americans have to do something about it. This is a media war against Iran. This is a communications war against Iran. And Twitter, being $1 billion American company, is straight away part of the American business elite. And the American business elite constitutes part of the American establishment. And the same applies to Facebook.
Okay. Now let's go to Michael Lane. Mike, anti-Iran terrorist group known as MKO, or some people call it MEK, was transferred to Tirana, Albania by the U.S. It was a deal that brokered by the U.S. after they were kicked out of Iraq. Now the group's members have said in their interviews that they were told to tweet and retweet, fabricated stories against Iran and make them viral very quickly through those engineering techniques and things Why does Twitter contribute to such anti-Iran agenda and false information?
Well, an excellent question. As I said in my first answer, Twitter is under pressure, both economic and political pressure, from many different fronts. And their first attempt to shut down those accounts emanating from Iran that were retweeting simultaneously the same stuff probably was technically correct, because they were technically identified by Twitter as bot accounts that didn't have real people behind them. But why? But those exist all over. And every government and not every organization, but many organizations have figured out how to do this and how to do it fairly sophisticatedly and fairly successfully. So why would Twitter focus on the Iranian accounts to start with at the expense of other accounts worldwide, including accounts emanating in the United States, but particularly of concern to the United States government, and therefore Twitter would be accounts emanating from Russia? I suspect that they are focusing their immediate attention on accounts where they're getting political pressure domestically here in the U.S. about accounts that are clearly not backed up by real people. But look, this is a technology company. They can identify accounts, phony accounts, a lot faster than they do. And the reason I suspect that they're not shutting them down is because they need to keep their numbers pumped up to keep their investors happy. It's a very difficult spiral that Twitter's caught in. And as I said in the beginning, they're an amazing company that's just in a lot of trouble.
Well, Mike, they're not phony accounts. There are accounts, but used by members of the MKO terrorist group, you know, and they are working from Tirana, Albania, and they have confessed to this. And Al Jazeera had a full report on that.
Anything that can be identified. First of all, I don't believe Twitter should be in the position of enforcing restrictions on free speech, but I do believe they should be in the business of enforcing responsible tweets in accordance with domestic law and international law. And as such, any terrorist group that is using the platform for purposes of furthering terror throughout their particular theater or throughout the world, Twitter has a responsibility to restrict those accounts. And to the extent that there are accounts that are known to be owned and operated by terrorist groups, I believe that it's Twitter's social responsibility to restrict and shut down those accounts. And the fact that they're not doing it is just yet another black mark on the company Twitter.
But it has done exactly the opposite of that anyway. It has closed the real Iran individuals' accounts, as Foreign Minister Zarif complained. Now let's go to Marcus Papadopoulos. Marcus, the MKO or MEK has its hands stained with the blood of some 17,000 Iranians, be it ordinary people or officials. They used to fight against Iran and along the Iraqis, Saddam Hussein's forces actually, and they're now fighting Iran on a different battlefield. You call it communications war. Iran's leader calls it media war. And now, and they are fighting this from their secret new base in Tirana, Albania.
Yes.
What is the U.S. role in all of this?
Well, I'm very glad you bring that up, because that terrorist organization is a murderous, repugnant one. It is an evil organization, and the fact that it is being supported by Western countries really shows that those Western countries are totally devoid of morals. But in regard to Albania, well, there is an Albanian connection in all of this, and let me just give you a very brief overview. Ever since the Kosovo War in 1999, Albania has become a client state of America. Albania is a black hole in Europe, along with Kosovo, when it comes to the drug trade, the sex trade, and the gun trade, and also the organ trade. But also, Albania is being used by America to put out not misinformation about countries such as Iran, but disinformation. And the relationship between America and Albania is incredibly close. And it never ceases to amaze me how many international relations commentators are just simply not aware either of the extent of this relationship between Washington and Tirana, or they're just oblivious to it. And of course, Iran has become a victim of this relationship. And there is a very extensive and strong misinformation presence in Albania, a presence that is responsible for putting out, not misinformation, disinformation about America's enemies in the world. So this, we really do need to put a spotlight on Albania.
Okay. Now to Washington. Mike Lane, U.S. Senators John Cornyn, Roy Blunt, and Thom Tillis were in Tehran in August 2017 to meet the members of the MEK. Now, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, also addressed the group's meeting in June 2018, where he called for regime change in Iran. What does U.S. government support for the cult-like terrorist group like this, say about Washington's claim of fighting terrorism worldwide?
Well, those senators and Mr. Giuliani clearly have a different point of view on what exactly the nature of that group was at that time, or maybe is at this time. And there are times when you meet with very, very bad actors for purposes of discovering whether or not you have anything in common that you can pursue on the world stage. The most obvious example of that, I would say, would be Mr. Trump's meeting with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, President Kim, who most people in the United States and in the Trump administration consider to be a bad actor, but yes, they had a meeting to discuss things where they might agree in terms of the denuclearization. So meetings themselves are not necessarily bad. But the other thing is things that Mr. Giuliani may have done and said before he became President's Trump lawyer.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes, we don't have much time, but
I was going to say,
the U.S. is talking about claiming to fight terrorism, and they are openly supporting a terrorist group like MEK.
Right. It is, as I said, there are times when you meet with bad actors to see if you have anything in common that you can pursue. And Mr. Giuliani's meeting with them was prior to his becoming Mr. Trump's lawyer, so therefore I don't think it can be associated with direct policy of the Trump administration, although we don't know what the Trump administration policy on that particular issue is specifically, I don't think.
Okay, Marcus, we have very little time. Please, let's have your comments on this.
Yes, there is no comparison whatsoever between North Korea and the terrorist organization MEK. North Korea is an independent sovereign country and a member of the United Nations. MEK is a murderous, bloodthirsty terrorist organization. It should not be of surprise to anyone who follows international relations that the Americans have ties to this repulsive group, because of course the Americans say publicly that they fight terrorism, whereas in reality they are actually one of the biggest supporters of terrorism in the world. And it's not just MEK, it is ISIS and Al-Qaeda and many people in the world, innocent people, men, women and children, have paid the price for America's ties to terrorist organizations like MEK.
All right, that's all the time we had. I should thank our guest who joined us, publisher and editor with Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos from London, and founder of American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mike Lane, who joined us from Washington, D.C. Thank you both gentlemen for being here on the debate, and thank you for watching this. We'll see you later.